This is Dr. Holly Lucile's Mindful Medicine. Here's Dr. Holly Lucile.
Well, hello, mindful listeners. It is Dr. Holly Lucile here from Mindful Medicine. It is so nice to be with you again. Listen, I want to talk about this subject so bad, and I'm so happy we have this guest. I, all the time, when I'm working with people in my clinical practice, talk and educate about environmental toxins. You know, how can we reduce exposure as much as possible with the things that we have control over? Things like, getting to understand what's organic. And I often cite EWG.org, which is Environmental Working Group, because you can find the Clean 15, the Dirty Dozen, also a cosmetic database, the stuff that we put on our skin, right? We want to reduce as much as the toxins as we can, but what do we do about the things that are more passive in our environment? Things like 5G, things like EMF. Well, this gentleman that I'm going to bring to the top of the show right away, because we got so much to talk about, is the guy to talk about. His name is R. Blank. He is the CEO of Shield Your Body. He has written a book. It's a best-selling book with his dad, Dr. Martin Blank, called Overpowered. And Dr. Martin Blank is one of the world's leading EMF scientists. So this all runs in the family. R. Blank, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Holly. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it is so great to have you. So, when I really want the listeners to understand the harm about 5G. I know that when technology advances, and shoot, I got it. I think I was offered a brand new phone for free if you can just upgrade to 5G. And everybody gets really excited about it. And technology is advancing and things are faster. And, we can hear better and clearer and further and all of these things. But there is a downfall to this, isn't there?
Yeah, there certainly is. So, there's a lot to unpack in that set of beliefs and assumptions that you just were talking about. So, just as a starting point, 5G is the fifth generation of cell phone networks. That's where it gets its name, 5G. So we're coming off of 4G. Before that, there was 3G. And what's different about 5G, there's a couple of key things. One is that it uses a different set of frequencies to communicate. So what do I mean by that? All wireless technology communicates using this invisible form of radiation called EMF, which stands for electromagnetic fields. And different types of EMF vibrate at different frequencies. And so 5G is using a whole bunch of new frequencies that have never before been used in consumer applications. So it's totally different from 4G, from Wi-Fi, from Bluetooth, from radio, all of that. And there's been some concern that there's been no long-term testing into what the health effects of these new frequencies are. And just so everyone understands pretty clearly, and I think your listeners won't be surprised by this, but that's exactly how all of this technology is rolled out. It's rolled out without any long-term testing. The long-term testing happens after the rollout, and we are the study subjects. We are, in effect, the lab rats. That said, 5G, while it uses these different frequencies, these are still forms of EMF radiation. And we now have decades and decades of research, numbering thousands of studies and continually growing, into what the effects of prior generations of this type of technology have been. And by prior generations, I'm referring not only to 4G and 3G, but to Wi-Fi, to Bluetooth, to radio, to cordless phones, to radar and television, which now go back quite some time. And we see that there are a wide range of negative health effects that result from exposure to this stuff. These are not generally the type of health effects that manifest after 5 minutes, but maybe after a year or 5 years or 10 years. Now, some do actually manifest after very short exposures, though. So when I'm talking about a wide range, I'm talking about issues such as anxiety and sleep disruption, both of which increase as a result of exposure to these forces, all the way up to multiple types of cancer and brain tumors. But not brain tumors are the ones that get the biggest headlines because they're kind of terrifying, but we see these links in thyroid cancer, in prostate cancer, in colorectal cancer, in breast cancer, in melanoma, all sorts.
It's interesting because those would be end results, right, of influencing these factors influencing the body. But I can imagine that it's creating a metabolic disorder and a mitochondrial disorder that then those cells have a hard time, doing their job, creating ATP, and then, they've got signaling that's gone wrong, and you've got tumor suppressor genes that are probably turned off, and that's where then this process happens, and the end result is a devastating diagnosis.
Yes, exactly correct. So there's several mechanisms that have been studied. Two of the what I believe are perhaps among the most important. One is, as you mentioned, DNA. So there's research now going back decades. Some of the most important studies, which have now been replicated multiple times, were conducted in the 1990s. These were using cordless phones, which are very similar to cell phones in terms of the irradiation. And what they found, doctors Henry Lai and Narendra Singh, what they found is that even short-term exposure to cordless phone radiation led to notable increases in DNA strand breaks. And that's where the information in your DNA is actually broken apart by the force of the radiation. And what that does, if both DNA strands break, then the cell kills itself, which in many ways is actually the preferred outcome, because if only one strand breaks, the cell will attempt to reconstruct that broken strand from the information in the other strand. And that's the process through which mutations can occur. And when those mutations occur, those are totally unpredictable. And those can lead to the types of damage that can result in tumors over an extended period of time. The second mechanism I would point out involves something called the voltage-gated calcium channels. And that's these little channels on your cells that regulate how much calcium gets into each cell. And research by Dr. Martin Pall has shown that EMF exposure influences or harms these VGCCs, the voltage-gated calcium channels, allowing too much calcium into cells, which leads to oxidative stress, which then leads to the accumulation of free radicals and all the damage that can result from those. So those are just two of the mechanisms that are quite well researched at this point. And those are the types, I guess, the precursors to the bigger sets of damage and disease that I was talking about earlier.
It's interesting that you bring this up because I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I can say, gosh, it's been now, I used to say last year, but it's been now the year before. And post my diagnosis and treatment, one of the things that my integrative oncologist, one of the things we're doing is definitely taking up the amount of, my environment, being aware of how I protect myself from my own EMFs and 5G. And I've got bells and whistles and all things to do that. And I know that your company, Shield Your Body, your mission is to make technology safer. And with everything that you've explained so lovely that I think people can really digest easily, what are the things that we can do? Because it's out there. 5G is like swiftering the nation. And as you said, not only is it's the new technology or the fifth generation, right? But we still have radio and television and Bluetooth and all the other things. So I bet there's like a synergistic influence on our body. And it makes it more important for us to do things. Like I said, we can choose organic. We can choose eco-friendly health and beauty aids or cleaning supplies. We can grow our own food. We can do a lot of things that we do have control over. How can we have a little bit more control over this?
So yeah, obviously speaking with someone like you, I don't have to underscore just quite how many toxins there are in the modern world that we are all exposed to all the time. But EMF does have different characteristics from many of the other toxins that pollute and characterize our modern environments. So one is that if you actually shut off the source of EMF, the EMF goes away. Now, in today's world, you couldn't just shut off all sources of EMF because those are the things that power the modern economy, the modern society. You'd have to go back to a world that looks something more like 1850 to get to a world without any human-made EMF. But that said, another characteristic of EMF is that the power of the EMF diminishes exponentially with distance. And what does that mean? It means if you have a cell phone an inch away from your body and you move it to 2 inches away from your body, the power of that exposure is cut by 75%. So that is a very important characteristic of EMF, which is why, even though there is so much EMF in our environment, and it is growing continually at almost exponential rates, if not actual exponential rates, every year, because of the number of different sources that are being deployed into our environments, despite all of that, it can be what you do with the sources closest to your body that can make the biggest difference. So whereas you can't just go out and shut down the cell towers, the 5 cell towers that you see from your home or your apartment, you can't do anything about those, right? What you can do is stop carrying your phone in your pocket. What you can do is never use your laptop in your lap. What you can do is never hold your cell phone up to your head. And in those 3 examples I have just given you, you can make a huge difference in your own personal level of exposure. The other side of that is you can also opt out of introducing more of these sources into your immediate environment. And what I'm talking about there is the stuff, all of this smart tech that is being developed and released and marketed. So it never used to be that your lock on your front door was a source of EMF. It never used to be that your kitty litter box was a source of EMF, right? But now they have smart locks and smart kitty litter boxes. They have smart hairbrushes. They even now have smart tampons. There are so many of these smart devices, and each one, it's not just that it's a source of EMF, it's that it's an additional source of EMF, because this all comes, as you pointed out, in addition to everything that we are already exposed to. And if just for some context for people, I don't know, every one of your listeners will be a different age, so their answer to this question will be different. But just step back and think what your bedroom looked like when you were 6 years old. Just look around, and how many sources of EMF were in that bedroom. When I was growing up, I can't think of one, actually, not even one. I mean, other than, of course, the wiring in the room, because we all run on I grew up in a house with electric power, but I'm talking about all of these devices. So my alarm clock was battery powered. That was not plugged into the wall. I didn't have a TV. I did have a radio, so that would have been a small source. But if I now step out into what an average child's room looks like today, you're looking at, maybe they have a phone line. Maybe they probably have a cell phone. Maybe they have a tablet. Maybe they have a computer. Maybe they have an Alexa. Maybe they have all of these different things. And that's what they're just exposed to in their own room. And that is the sort of the scale of growth of these technologies that we have been seeing, and that continues.
Those tips, like you said, when you said it, I actually picked my phone up and I moved it 3 inches away from me.
Good move.
Those are great tips, but also there are accessories, correct? Like I told you before the show, like when you and I were just chatting. So I have a sleeve on my phone that is supposedly, protecting the fields, the electromagnetic fields, that I can actually talk to. So I can put it on my head and I'm not having that exposure. I also wear something on my wrist, and I actually wear a necklace as well. Can you talk about those accessories that people can actually purchase and help them protect themselves even more?
Sure. So at Shield Your Body, we focus on 2 key things, one of which is education, like the information I've been sharing with you. And that is because, EMF is kind of sometimes a complex, definitely a foreign concept to many people, so it's important to educate, but also because it is important for people to understand that the best forms of defense against EMF are behavioral. They involve your personal relationship with technology in your lives that is under your control. And so that's what we started out talking about.
Yeah. And it's so fun because at the top of the show, I was like, hey, these are things that are out of your control. But actually, you're just shining and illuminating the light that we have now, things that we can do and bring them back in our control. And that's what's most exciting.
Oh, well, I'm glad you picked up on that, because that's what I like. I like to hear that from people. So then the other thing we do at SYB is we create laboratory tested EMF protection products. And while the best and most important things that you can do to protect yourself are your personal behavior with technology, your personal relationship with technology, EMF protection products are an important tool. They are what I call the second line of defense, because some exposures are unavoidable, like the ones from the nearby cell towers or your neighbor's Wi-Fi networks, and some may be avoidable, but not practically so. So maybe you shouldn't carry your phone in your pocket, but you need your phone on for work and you don't have anywhere else to carry it. So so you have exposures that are unavoidable or you prefer not to avoid. And that's where EMF protection products come in. Now, if your listeners go out and just Google EMF protection product, there will be a huge variety of options available. And this is not a regulated, like many sectors, this is not a regulated sector. So people have all these different types of products. EMF is a very kind of poorly understood concept by a lot of people, so they don't know what to look for. There are a lot of different kinds of this protection. The kind that we make at SYB are a type of shielding protection. And what do I mean by shielding? Well, EMF shielding works to deflect EMF radiation in the opposite direction, just like a window shade deflects sunlight away from your window. And this is based on technology. It's now almost 200 years old, invented by a British scientist named Michael Faraday, which is where some of your listeners may be familiar with the term Faraday cage. He invented the Faraday cage. And what he showed is that if you weave conductive metals into certain patterns, you can deflect EMF radiation. And in the intervening 200 years, technology has advanced so that you don't need like this big gated fence kind of structure to do it. You can actually weave microscopic metallic fibers into fabrics. And so that's what we use in our products, are these EMF shielding fabrics. And we put them into, for instance, a phone pouch or into our baseball cap or into a baby blanket. And these work to shield your body from harmful EMF radiation by deflecting the EMF radiation in the other direction. Now, unlike many types of EMF protection, ours are not only based on universally accepted science, they're also laboratory tested to do what we claim they do. And we also provide a lot of educational materials so that if people were willing to go out and buy a decent $160 EMF meter, we show them how they can use that meter to prove to themselves that my products are doing exactly what we claim they are doing. So we have this catalog of electronics accessories, apparel, and bed canopies, all featuring EMF laboratory tested EMF shielding. And that's how they work to protect you from these forces.
I love it. I mean, I think it's so important. I have to tell you this. This is way back over 20 years ago, early on in my practice. There's a woman who is still in my life today. She was a patient. She claims that I diagnosed her breast cancer, but the reason that I was able to do that was because she came in and guess where she was wearing her phone?
In her bra.
In her bra. And that was like back in the day, right? When and I have to tell you, I can't tell you the amount of times after that experience, because I think this is a whole part about this podcast, right? Mindful medicine. So can we be more mindful about things? And for me, even knowing what I know, there was so much when I got into this space that I didn't know. And folks, honestly, when you go to shieldyourbody.com, or what ours says SYB for short, there you can put in your email, you get a free download, and that's going to help you with that behavioral change. So that's important. But then because I think it's so pervasive, it's so great that there are things that you can actually purchase and bring this whole situation back in your control. And what I was going to say is that I can't tell you, I probably over 100 times in the last 20 years, would I see a woman like on a hiking trail or in a mall or, while I was on vacation, having her phone in her bra and or in her pants right by her ovaries, where I would have to just risk it and go up to a stranger and say, listen, I don't mean to bother you, but then I would tell her the story. And so hopefully, those little nudges for folks could increase awareness, because I think it's just a matter of habit, right? We just, let's just put it there. But now there are things and apparel that you can get where you can actually enjoy, the technology that we do have and the benefits that we get from it and mitigate the harm it does to our bodies.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I agree fully with what you were just talking about.
Talk to me a little bit about, because you mentioned like baby blankets. I want to talk about EMF and children, because I am not kidding you. This was about a month ago. I saw a baby carriage, right, just being pushed by a mom down the street. And it was a lovely day, here in Southern California. It was probably 76 degrees. The sun was out, wasn't too hot, wasn't too cold. The birds were chirping. And this toddler who was in the carriage being pushed wasn't looking around and taking in the scenery or, the squirrels on the wires or nature or anything like that. The toddler had a phone in front of his face and in his hands and was playing games on a phone while they're outside. And I'm telling this story because, usually I would think you'd go outside to be outside, right? And then you've got a parent that sticks this phone in the kid's possession to just stare at and be influenced by, no matter what was on the screen, but the screen itself and the device itself. It was just unbelievable to me.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I know fully what you're talking about. I mean, in terms of, all humans are, or certainly, those who live in the developed world are continually using and engaging with technology in more and more of their lives. And children are no exception. The risks with children, though, and this is, I think, what might have been originally asking about, are much greater. The younger you are, the risk of damage from the same EMF exposure is much greater. So teens are more vulnerable than adults. Children are more vulnerable than teens. Babies are more vulnerable than children. And in utero, you're most vulnerable of all. Now, there are a few reasons for this. I mean, one is that children are just smaller. And so if you think of, there's an amount of radiation from a phone, and that penetrates, let's say, an inch into your brain. On a child with a smaller brain, that will cover much, much more of the brain. So a higher percentage of their brain would be exposed. But that's not the only difference. There are other differences. One is that the younger you are, the faster, the more rapid the rate of cell division, because that's how you grow. Your cells divide. So any damage to a cell will replicate much more rapidly. And of course, children have much longer to live with the damage. So there is more time for the damage to accumulate and manifest as disease. And those are just a few. There's others that get into more physiological characteristics. But the science clearly shows that the younger you are, the more vulnerable you are to damage from these exposures.
So gosh, it makes all the sense in the world to start preventing this damage, especially because we're using technology more and more as soon as possible. And I see I think you make such a great point. How many times people, they're called laptops, right? Where do you put them? On your lap.
Well, and
what's on your lap?
I'll give a good example of this too, because not everyone calls them laptops anymore, like Apple doesn't, but Dell still does. And if you open the Dell manual that comes with the laptops, that the product they call a laptop, it says you need an 8-inch separation between the device and your body to use it safely. But they still call the product a laptop. But that's an example of, in a lot of these products, if you actually read the manual, you'll find some really sniffy kind of disclaimers in there. Another one is Apple iPhones, where if you read the manuals, it calls for a minimum distance of separation between the device and your body. But they're literally designed to be used up against your head. But if you read the manual, it says don't do that. But
Little
people don't read the
going
manuals.
on there.
Yeah, exactly.
We told you.
Yeah.
We told you that you should have it across the room, but yeah. And so, you have on your site, and I have in front of me, underneath my laptop, is a pad. And that pad is designed to protect me if I do take my laptop, away from my desk that I'm working on, and I take it, in front of once again, where would you take it? Maybe in front of the television, where you're getting, another, influencing factor that is somewhat quote unquote passive. But I mean, you bring such great points to this, because I think that there's a lot of boycotting when 5G came out, and people weren't understanding that. And I think that you talk about it so eloquently that, listen, this is causing cellular damage. And then that cellular damage makes our metabolic resilience decrease, and disease processes can ensue. And then, like I said, you can end up with a diagnosis like any sort of cancer. But hey, I always think, what's the mechanism behind the diagnosis? What happened? What soil, got tainted so that you got sick in it? So we got to change the soil. And then, part of shielding your body is changing that soil. It's protecting your terrain. It's not allowing that microenvironment to influence the cells in a negative way. It's actually creating protection and health. And I think that's what we've got to start looking at things that way.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I mean, I came from a tech background. So I got into this field when, as you noted, I co-wrote Overpowered with my father. But before that, I had a career in software engineering, and in California, of all places. So you're really at the center of the tech industry. And I was raised in in an era where technology was very compelling. It was advancing so quickly. I mean, it's still advancing quickly, but the actual functional leaps and bounds that were happening every year, were just awe-inspiring. And the creation of the World Wide Web, which happened in my lifetime, and all of the newer computers and phones that were coming out, they really were powering significant leaps both in business productivity, but also in terms of human enjoyment, human entertainment. And I then had this career in software where you really see just so clearly every new advance, people just welcome. Like, great, we now have this new technology. It's because it's a new technology, we love it, it's cool, I want it. There is this real bias, and again, it's heaviest in the tech industry, but it really has spread throughout the entire population, where when there's a new technology, you're just drawn to it. You think it's great, you need it. And the fact is, and I think people now are increasingly starting to realize this, but just because the industry has released a new piece of technology does not mean that you need to buy it. It does not mean that it comes without harm. And in fact, I think particularly within the last year, people are starting to realize that technology isn't all good. Technology does incur risks for harm, both to your physical health and your mental health. And again, I think this was most clearly demonstrated last year with the Facebook whistleblower testimony, Frances Haugen. But people are now talking about, well, I really need to take a fast from Facebook. Instagram really isn't good for kids. They're talking about technology in ways now that shows that people are actually aware that there are risks to your health from just this unbridled acceptance of immersing yourself in every new gadget that the industry is releasing.
Yeah. I mean, you say that, it's so funny. It's like, I live in Los Angeles, right? So it's like, it used to be, I mean, obviously the pandemic has influenced us in a certain way, but once a new piece of technology drops, the snaking line that would be out, people would line up at midnight for the store to open at 7 a.m. so they could have their hands on this new device.
I know, it's amazing.
It's amazing. I don't stand online for anything, let alone like a new phone that you could get easily in 2 weeks without that line. But that's how.
Or you wait a year and you can get it for half the price.
Right. Or for free because they want you to get on that 5G.
Right.
You know what I love so much about you is that you do have a company, Shield Your Body. But what you offer to people is so much education without even buying a thing. The tips and the tricks that you offer on your website, and then your podcast too. Your podcast, it is the Healthier Tech Podcast. Where can people listen to that?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. The Healthier Tech Podcast is on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Amazon and every major podcasting platform. And on that podcast, you know, where Shield Your Body, through the work I do through Shield Your Body, is really focused on EMF in particular. The Healthier Tech Podcast is focused on a wider range of topics that are all based on finding ways to establish a healthier relationship with technology. So in the season that is being released right now, for instance, I interview a European member of parliament who is spearheading the legislation to pass at the European level rights that already exist at certain countries called the right to disconnect, which is a legal right for you not to be tied to your phone after work hours. Ooh. Which, when you talk to an American about that, they just don't even, they can't comprehend that such a right even exists. But it already exists in multiple countries, France and Ireland and Portugal. And this member of parliament is working to pass it at the European level. We also talk about the health effects of digital detox. So we really work on covering a much wider range of topics that I believe a lot of people are increasingly interested in, which is finding a more, and it's appropriate for this podcast, a more mindful relationship with technology in your lives.
Yeah. And it really does take, mindfulness takes work. I mean, I even notice behaviors in myself. Like I had a lot of shifting professionally go on lately, and I'm working my days out and my schedules out to be balanced and such. And it's a little bit less stimulus than I'm used to. And so in that quiet time, I find myself just almost habitually like just grabbing my phone and opening it up and scrolling through, 7 seconds of social media. And there is that sort of addictive quality to it.
Technology is hyper addictive. It is hyper, and it's being engineered to be hyper addictive. And I mean, and it's not just an opinion at this point. There's real research behind it. So it's not just a metaphorical use of the term addiction. Technology is engineered to be as addictive as possible, and that's why you are having those reflexes and reactions.
Yeah. And so that's where the mindfulness comes. I mean, it's the same thing with the food industry, and it's designed to be addictive. It's like just keep drinking and eating that crap because it's, it sells and makes people a lot of money, but it's doing us harm. Same thing here. R. Blank, thank you so much for being here on Mindful Medicine. This is so much lovely information for folks to actually do what we want them to do, is just open their minds a little bit more about everything that's going on so they can make healthier choices for themselves and their family. Folks, don't forget, go to shieldyourbody.com. You can get a free download about your own behavioral changes, right? Knowledge is power. Self-knowledge about who you are and how you use these devices is superpower. And then also, there are products that you can purchase to protect yourself. And I think it's just a must, absolutely a must. So R. Blank, thank you for the work that you do, and for the work that your father has done. And mindful listeners, I appreciate you so much being here, spending part of your day, and I'm going to see you next time.